Hi, and welcome back to another episode of the Vixen Voice. So we have a somewhat steamy interview for you today. It's my pleasure to introduce Laura Richards. Laura is the host of the global podcast, That's Where I'm At. What an awesome name, right? And get this, she just had the #1 new release on Amazon, her book, 52 Keys to Healing After Divorce. So Laura, such a pleasure to have you. Welcome.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm excited to hear about this steamy conversation we're going to have.
Just because you are fun, I'm going to like it. So I love that. So as you'll know, I always share why I've invited the guest on, because I like to say the Vixen Voice is a wild ride through the mind of April Robertson. Yes, it can be a scary place, but it's never boring. So today...
Great. I feel at home.
Excellent. So today we have Laura, and as I expected, she showed up colorful and beautiful. If you see any of her pictures, she's in vivid color all the time. And that's because 33 years she lived in a marriage that was maybe not so colorful, right? So we're going to share Laura's story today, her blossoming into this amazing woman she is. And what I love about Laura is how open and vulnerable and how real she is about her story, and how she has this movement to help other women. She gives them a space on her podcast to share what she calls their dark stories of emotional abuse and narcissism. But the cool part is also sharing how they came to the light of self-love. So it's obvious when you meet Laura that she's come to that light. So I can't wait to dig in. So Laura, again, welcome.
Thank you so much. Thanks for having me. I appreciate it.
Yeah, thanks for joining me. I mean, #1 bestseller, global podcast. I'm glad you could squeeze me into your schedule.
Of course. I love that we have the opportunity to talk to people and share all over the world, right? From the comfort of our home. I just love that. It's really, it touches my introvertness. That's for sure. So...
Do you know what's funny is I'm a 9 on a scale of 10 of extroversion. I would have told you till a few years ago. And I have been snowed in since Saturday, and it's Thursday. And I have been a happy pea in a pod in my home, with my crock pot full of food. I love it. Hibernating.
Oh, yes. I made my soup yesterday. I think we all figured out during the pandemic what we really were. If we were introverts or extroverts, but I heard that it's really when you like to recharge. And so I learned during the pandemic, I do like to recharge alone. Thank you. Yes, that I don't have to cancel plans, but I love being social. And so this is really up my alley to be able to share with the world what I went through, how other people can love themselves, and then still be in the comfort of my home. I love it. Best of both worlds.
It's so funny you're talking about, from the comfort of our home. I was kind of laughing yesterday. I'm like, this is my 4th podcast today. And most people right now, because we're snowed in, are having a snow day. And I'm like, I'm full force.
I know. I have 3 today. It's one of those days. So it just worked out that way. So it works out. I love it. I can just go to my kitchen, eat some lunch, come back and do another episode.
That's exactly what I just did. No, I love it. I'm so blessed to be doing what I'm doing. And, the cool thing is running our own ship, we can take that day any day we want, right? We don't have to wait for snow day. So I love it. So, the purpose of the Vixen Voice is to help women understand they're not alone in their journey and to inspire them to a greater life. And I think that's absolutely what you do through your podcast and your story as well. So I think it's best, why don't we, if we can just kind of dive in, maybe share your story and why you do what you do today.
Well, sure. So I was with a narcissist for 33 years and goodness. So when I was getting a divorce in 2022, because we just had irreconcilable differences, April, we just couldn't come to any agreements on certain things. And I just felt like he's kind of a jerk, and he got to be really a big jerk in the last few years of our marriage. And when we were getting a divorce, I was like, I don't know. We're just having a reconcilable difference. I'm really sad, blah, blah, blah. I'm going through, I don't mean to say blah, 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 like it's nothing, but I'm going through the motions of getting a divorce. I'm very sad. And then I find out that he had a quote unquote new girlfriend who was not so new. And she's been there all along, and she was not the first one. So, you know, sometimes he's not a diagnosed narcissist because he wouldn't go anywhere near anything that would diagnose him with anything. But it's the traits, it's the behaviors, and that's the thing I want people to understand. It doesn't. You don't have to diagnose anybody with anything. You don't have to label anybody with anything. This is about behaviors. He was exhibiting behaviors that were not working for me anymore. You know, there was no changes, no empathy, no forgiveness, no being sorry for anything, no reciprocity. So in a marriage, you know, there should be reciprocity, right? We should be 50-50. Sometimes I've heard it be like 100-100, not just 50-50, you know, and being a team. So when I found out about her, I kind of felt like I started the clock over again on my healing in my divorce. And I started to feel very alone because I felt like a fool. I felt like I was in a faith community, and many people were like, well, just forgive him, move on, just go on with your life. And I felt very alone in the fact that I was so angry. And I'm like, I need to talk to somebody because I feel like I'm angry about this. Like, how am I just like forgiving and moving on? What? You know what I mean? Like, then I just started unraveling 33 years and hindsight, and all these things were coming to my mind. And that feeling alone was really what drove me to do what I'm doing. So at the time, I just started creating silly videos. I was not anywhere thinking about a podcast. I just started creating reels about my divorce, about finding out about the girlfriend, who I call the girl clown, because he's a clown, so she is the girl clown. And that's what
I love it.
Yeah, that's the nicest thing I could say about her. So yes, that's all I can say. And so I just started doing funny videos, and thankfully my kids were kind of 50-50. I have 3 grown children, and so they were like, okay, Mom, we get it. Whatever. Do your thing. And then my poor son was like, Mom, do you have to like display this on for everyone to see? I'm like, I'm not saying anything about your dad. I'm using the words my ex. And my kids were like, well, people who know you know who he is. I'm like, I know. I'm sorry. But there's 2 sides to a story. I want to tell mine because I felt so alone in my narrative. I felt so alone in my healing. And as I started to go along with talking about my divorce and making these videos, and people coming to me going, hey, Laura, do you know, I was married to a narcissist, or I was married to an abusive man. I was married to, you know, whatever, in my first marriage. And this is my second marriage. And I want you to know that there's hope, and that this is my second marriage. I've been married to this man for 30 years, and I'm so happy. And I'm like, oh, when people tell their stories in safe places, shame is broken. And that is what I wanted to portray to the world, was we need to not walk around in shame. Like, oh, it's such a shame that you're this poor divorced woman and your husband just went off. And okay, but that's not okay. And I felt alone. And so I wanted to build that community of not just a community of telling our stories and being like, you know, I don't want it to be a bitch fest, right? About, I don't hate men. I don't hate men. It was about the abuse that's happening. The things I hate are abuse and lying and all these things that I didn't want to continue. And I felt like other people were feeling they were alone. So I decided one day to call a friend who has a media company, a podcast company. And I said, what do you think about me doing a podcast about this? And she's like, yeah, I could tell it was time. And I was like, okay. So I decided to do it and really start building that community of not only telling our stories. We don't need to use names. It doesn't matter, because it doesn't matter. Insert your issue here, you know, insert your story here, because you're going to have a story that's very similar, or you'll have a story that you've been through, that you might get a nugget from my episodes. I have so many different episodes, and you'll probably get a nugget, and doesn't have to match, right? But I wanted people to know that they're not alone, and that's what I was feeling. So I couldn't allow that to continue.
I love that. So much in what you just shared for us to unpack. First, you said at least 3 or 4 times I felt alone, and that was the impetus. So can we go deeper with that? Like,
Sure.
Did you feel alone as an isolated, or what, was it like in your head, or alone in your shame, or were people actually extricating you, or both? I mean, there's no right answer, but what did you experience? Because we all experience that differently, right?
Yeah. And that's a great question, because it was a lot of things. It wasn't just like, one thing. So there were people who were like, yeah, you shouldn't talk about this. I had multiple people telling me that you shouldn't really be talking about it. Why are you making videos? Like, you shouldn't even be, why are you posting your dirty laundry on Facebook, kind of thing. And then I had, people telling me, well, it's just time to move on. And here's a book on forgiveness or something. It's just time to forgive and move on. It's like, it might not be time yet. You know what I mean? Like it.
Yeah.
And so I felt very misunderstood. And that's what kind of fueled my loneliness and my feeling alone. I was like, has no one else been through a divorce? But you'll find your tribe, because the minute I started really, really talking about it and what I was going through, oh my gosh, I had so many friends who were like, did you know I was married to a narcissist? Did you know my last, marriage was abusive? And I was like, nope, because we don't talk about it. And that's why my podcast is, we're talking about things that society has told us, maybe you shouldn't talk about it. And I'm like, we're going to talk about it. We're going to spread it around the world, because people are dying in silence. Women are dying in silence. And so I know it's very heteronormative, but I just am doing women. That's just because that's my perspective. I mean, insert a man here if you need to. You know what I mean? Like, that's because women can be narcissists as well. And you can just insert whatever you need to into your story.
Yeah, no, I agree. And I can relate, because my ex-husband suffered from addiction. And at that time, it was taboo to talk about addiction, right? So, here I had this supposed fairy tale life where I moved to Italy with this man, and everybody's like, what's happening? And, I mean, and honestly, I was still in love with my ex when we were getting divorced, and he was very much in love with me. And so for me, a lot of it was to protect him, which is also the codependent behavior that then allows them to continue their addiction, right? And so,
unfortunately, yes.
when I understood that is when I felt free to talk about it, because I didn't want to dishonor him in that state I was in. But yeah, it's really interesting how, if something's taboo and we're not supposed to talk about it, well, then not only do people suffer in silence, but then the perpetrators get to continue perpetrating, to whatever degree that is.
And that was my concern too. Not to, unfortunately, he's already, he spoke poorly of me for a long time. Being in another family for 33 years, of course, I could not win over his family. And I have now since learned that he was speaking poorly of me behind my back, so that people wouldn't find a way to like me, couldn't like me. I couldn't get close. If we met any of his friends and they liked me, you know how you can tell people like you, and we would never see them again. Or he would tell me that, everyone had a problem with you and the way you behaved. And so I was like, wait, what did I do? I mean, I don't remember doing anything. And so I really felt like he controlled the narrative of our lives. And so because of that, I decided I wanted to control the narrative. And that's kind of why I started talking about it. And I don't say his name. If you know him, then you know his name. If you don't know him, it doesn't matter, because it doesn't matter. It doesn't matter his name. And if they're telling their side of the story, no, I don't have to, say like, well, I'm going to tell mine. I don't have to do that. But my drive is to help women understand, are you in abuse, or are you in a miserable life? Are you in a miserable marriage? what can you do? I don't promote divorce, but I also don't believe in staying in a marriage if you're being abused. And so I just want to give women a place to listen. And I have a lot of experts, a lot of people like you who have been through it, to talk about it and say, well, this is what I did, and that's what I want to do. So people can make their own decisions. I'm not encouraging, I'm not sponsored by a divorce lawyer or something. No, that's not what I'm doing. That's not.
You're not getting kickbacks, huh?
I'm not. It's a great idea though.
I know.
Just kidding.
Let's see if we can get you an affiliate program.
Right.
So, no, I love that. And, why I think we came across each other on like a podcasting Facebook group or something. I can't even remember,
I think so.
But you caught,
I don't either.
Yeah. I don't reach out to many people, but you caught my attention. And, one is just, I love the colorful way you present yourself. So, I mean, I'm very much a child. I'm like, ooh, bright and shiny. Let me go talk to this person, right?
Yes, exactly. Squirrel.
Yeah. So it caught my attention. And then when I saw that you were talking about narcissism, the reason I like that is because I teach a lot of like self-love concepts. I coach on that and setting boundaries. And I always say when setting a boundary, like, like when they escalate, you stay here, and a normal human being will start coming down. Right.
Right.
And then you can have a conversation, and sometimes you have to walk away and come back, but you want to wait until you're at the same emotional level, like calm, to have a conversation. And then I was like, and often people be like, well, what if they don't? And I'll be like, well, they're probably a narcissist or a sociopath. So that's beyond my level of expertise.
Right.
But I do think if you're conducting yourself properly and you do the work to do that, and you see they're not replicating or meeting you halfway, then you probably are dealing with a narcissist. Is that fair to say?
And I'm not exactly sure, but I think you're right in saying that you're going to be dealing with a person who's really toxic if they will not, because these people will not match calm behavior. They will turn everything around. So the term is DARVO, which is deny, attack, reverse offender. Let's see, reverse. I don't know. Oh, I don't remember.
That's okay.
And this is the thing, is that what they're doing, because I would always, when I heard this term, I was like, oh my gosh, I would sit in every conversation that we were having. I don't care what it was. I would say to my ex, this is an issue I'm having. And he would say, well, let me tell you how it's your fault. Okay. So they turn it around. They deny that they've done it. They reverse it so that you're the problem.
Right.
And so if you're always having someone who's doing that, always denying, like I can't tell you, maybe on one hand, how he ever said he was sorry about anything, does not matter, because it was always my fault. At some point you start to believe it. This is just a very toxic trait. They may or may not be a narcissist. Most likely they are. Yeah. Or a sociopath, Yeah. And so you're not going to get anywhere with people like that. Unfortunately, you're not.
Yeah. And I think I read somewhere, at least sociopaths, I'm not sure the numbers on narcissists, but you know, they make up like 1% of the population, maybe 2%. So this isn't like a common occurrence. So you need to know, but yeah, that was my thought. Anytime it's a toxic relationship, which again, you have to, sometimes you can't see the forest for the trees when you're in it. Right. And so it takes something external to show you. And again, we'll put this in the show notes, what DARVO is, but I think V might be victim because in my experience, they normally attack, but they also play the victim. So if someone's like hitting you from both places, I mean, how are you going to win in that conversation?
It's a reverse victim offense. Yes, because they're turning it around. They're no longer going to be the victim. You are. And can I it's so funny because I was just listening to a longer reel before I came on with you about that 1%. So it's interesting that you brought it up. So I want to bring it up. He said 1% are diagnosed. Okay. They have NPD. Okay. Which is, narcissistic personality disorder, but that is diagnosed. which to me I think is an oxymoron, because narcissists are going nowhere near anyone who will diagnose anything. And
Right.
1% is 78 million people. That's
Wow.
yeah. So
Keep it
so
in perspective.
right. And when he said that, I was like, oh, whoa. Because that 1%, they do actually say it's probably closer to 15%, but they're not going to be diagnosed. My ex is not diagnosed. Do I need him to be diagnosed? No, nothing will happen. It doesn't matter. And that's why the thing that you have to remember is intent and their behaviors. Okay, so if they're always turning it around on you, anything like that, you're just dealing with a toxic person. And unfortunately, if you don't hear them saying, I'm so sorry that happened, I'm so sorry I did that to you, usually it's, I'm so sorry you feel that way. Guess what? That's not an apology. I'm so sorry you feel that way is not an apology. And so we just have to know how to deal with toxic people, and then we choose if we're going to stay or not.
Well, because when they say, I'm so sorry you feel that way, that's them not taking ownership over what happened, right?
Yeah.
It's, again, putting all the blame on you in a way.
Right.
So what I heard in you sharing your story is you talked about feeling alone once you found out about, the other woman and the multiple other women, and it kind of unraveled and you realized what you had been in. But then when you also shared how he would behave with his family, your friends, it sounded like he was always isolating you for whatever. We don't care about his intent. The result was you were being isolated, right?
Yeah.
So how did the loneliness in the marriage differ from the loneliness after? And what did you do to survive that? Because you're obviously a very vivacious, energetic, giving person. So, do you mind sharing
I wasn't
with us,
I wasn't
how
like
you
this
got
for
by?
sure. Yeah.
Yeah.
How I got by was I really tried to find groups. I was heavily involved in my church group, and I had some other moms groups when my kids were younger. Found those friends. Now, you have to be careful with that because, of course, if you go even to something that's good, like a church group where I was leading a women's table and we were having great discussions and everyone thought I was great and whatever, you're going to come home and he's going to be so sad that you left and you left him alone all night and he had to be alone. But of course, if, the next day they'll probably go out for hours on end and go do whatever they want to do. It's always an issue. But this is where I really grew, is in these friendships, because people couldn't believe it when I was divorcing and then going through these things. And that's the thing, is you see this person, this has taken a lot of work. I am this way that now all the time. When I was at home, I wasn't like this, because they don't want you bigger than they are. They don't want you happier than they are. And then they tell you, God, you're no fun to be around because you're so unhappy all the time. But they have created this monster, I'm calling myself a monster, but they've created this monster of you are so sad and depressed because everything's your fault. Everything's a problem. They're off doing whatever they want to do. And you're sad and lonely and depressed at home. And then they tell you, well, you're no fun to be around. It's that constant thing. So what I want to remind people is that the toxic, narcissistic, it doesn't matter. Is this the life you want to be living? Is this how you want to be treated? Even in a friendship. So, because, there's narcissistic friends. And do you want to be treated this way constantly all the time, where your side of anything never matters? Be thinking about that, because you're really worth more than that. And that's the point I got to when I started doing more and more work on myself. Well, because ironically, they make you so sad and depressed that you end up going to therapy. And in therapy is where I learned, hey, I am actually more valuable than being in a marriage where I wanted to unalive myself. That's the point I got to, because that's how sad and depressed I got, because I thought, I don't understand what else I can do to make him happy, because people in church or all my friends are like, Laura, you're the best. And we love being with you. And I'd go home and it's garbage and you're terrible and all that. And so you have to, I've had friends who recommended taking notes and kind of keeping a journal to say okay, he did this, he did that, and kind of look for patterns. Because maybe you feel like you're going crazy, especially if they're gaslighting you. Maybe you feel like you're going crazy because you might feel that way at the end. And I thought that was really good advice to kind of take notes and be like, okay, there is a pattern of poor behavior. And then you have to decide, what am I going to do with that? And how am I going to live?
Yeah, there's two things you touched on. One, I love when you say, is this the life you want to live? And, you know, for me, what pushed me kind of towards separation and then divorce was I had to ask myself, do I want to be this person? Like, it wasn't about him, but, you know, I'm checking his coat pocket to see if there are drugs there. I'm checking, like, I never wanted to be that person that didn't trust my significant other. And, you know, even in this case, he had always been faithful to me. I didn't have any reason to doubt him there, but I had reason to doubt if he was lying to me or not about using. And I didn't want to be that person searching coat pockets and under here and there and looking for things. And that's kind of what catapulted me to make a change. Well, I say catapulted. I mean, I totally fell apart, which forced me to make
that's
a
real.
change. Yeah, that's
real.
It was not a superhero moment for sure. So I'm going to watch my language.
I know. I want to pretend like it was some glorious event as I walked out the door, you know, like some rom-com or something. And I know better. And so I'm walking out the door like this wonderful woman. No, I mean, I slinked out the door in depression. But you know what? And I think we didn't talk about it, but you had asked me about loneliness then after the divorce.
Yeah.
And I have to say, there's nothing better, because you know what? That's the thing is I made a video one time. I said, people ask me if I'm lonely with this empty pillow next to me. You know what's lonelier? Being in a marriage where you're dying from loneliness. So it's not being in a marriage is just being in a marriage and you got to stick with that forever. Look, we are elevating the institution of marriage above people, and we have to honor people that are in a marriage. And if they are dying from all these things, it's not worth it. Why? To say what? It's not the taboo it used to be. You know what I mean? Like, you know, it's kind of the sad thing, and also an empowering thing. 77% of divorces are being initiated by women now, because we do not have to wait for a man to, you know, sign us up for a credit card or help us with a house loan, which frankly, not that many decades ago, that was the thing that was happening. And women can make their own money. Now I have some episodes on my podcast where we do talk about instances. Of course, financial abuse is very real in a divorce. But people have talked about, I have an episode coming up where she talked about how she got out, and that it took her 2 years to get out, but she wanted out. And so she made a plan. And sometimes we need to do that, but women don't have to stay in forever just because, they don't work. And I feel bad sometimes thinking that. I was living in a room at my brother's house for a year, and everybody was like, "Are you okay?" I'm like, "Hell yeah, I am. I'm great." Yeah. And me and my cat living in this room, better than living there. And that's the thing. Sometimes you have to say those words out loud to remind yourself what you left, because your brain in a trauma bond is going to say, "Well, we really miss our life." I'm like, "What do you miss?" You have to talk to your brain. What do you miss? That he lied, that he stopped talking to you. You know, what do you miss? Make, I don't know if I'm allowed to cuss or not on your show.
Go for it.
Okay. So make a shit list of all the terrible things they've done, because your brain is going to want to remember the good times, because we do have both. So.
Well, and the other challenge is, as humans, we become addicted to our negative emotions because they are actually chemicals created by our brain, right? So, and you know, I've done a lot of spiritual work and work on myself to become unaddicted. And so now I can look around and be like, "Oh, you're addicted to your negative emotions." And that's not a judgment. It's a realization. And it's like, well, how can I help? And this is an epidemic amongst humanity today, even if you're not in a traumatic situation, that we are addicted to our negative emotions. So I can't even imagine when you throw the trauma on top of it, you're already addicted to that. And like you said, it's like, I miss him. And sometimes, often people become addicted to the drama. They want to leave. And it's because we're addicted to that negative chemical reaction in our body.
That dopamine hit. Our brain really wants it back. That's why you want to look at social media. You want to see what they're doing. Your brain wants that dopamine hit. And see, that's why it's so hard. You have to cut it off like an ugly growth on your body. And it's hard. It is like a drug addiction. Now, I've never been addicted to drugs, but people have told me it's like a drug addiction. You want it so bad. I just need a little hit. I just need to check his social media real quick. Why? And then the next thing you know, you're out for a half a day crying because he's off, wherever with the new girl. And he's doing all the things that you wanted him to do with you. But that's part of the lesson that we need to learn. And when I know, even if he's not diagnosed, he's a narcissist, I know what he will do next. I predicted when he would get married, when, all these things. I predicted it all. Like, I saw it coming. And with that knowledge, you can move forward in power, because knowledge is power. And so if we know this is what they'll do next, now it's not about you. Because I walk around saying, I'm a hell of a catch. I was fishing at the wrong pond, okay? I was with the wrong fisherman. That's the thing, is people don't understand. So don't look at him going, oh, he's taking that girl, the new girl, to Europe or whatever. And that's what I always want to do. It's not about you. It's about him. He can't be alone, and he has to show the world, I'm so great, and Laura was a problem. And so I'm going to reward my new person by giving her anything she wants, that kind of thing. So we have to remember that.
Yeah. And it's hard. And like you said, it's like breaking addiction.
So
if you're going through it and you're listening, just stay the course. And we'll get to maybe some tips that you can offer. I want to cover one more thing you mentioned, because you used the term gaslighting. So someone very close to me, a good friend of mine, when she was going through therapy of her divorce, her therapist explained to her gaslighting. She was like, that's the first time I've ever understood that. And I believe it's a term very misused in society today. So can you kind of explain gaslighting? Because I think when you understand it, it really helps a lot of women.
Yeah, it's
or
hard.
Men, whoever's being gaslit.
Yeah, seriously. It's very hard to, I'm sure if I could find a definition, I would, but this is what it will sound like. Look, I was gaslit in therapy. So it's really people telling you, sort of like not believing your story, and that you are trying to make up something. And this can be in any situation. And you could say, oh, I fell down, or I hurt myself, or whatever. And April, you could just be like, Laura, that doesn't seem likely. And it's not just someone calling you out as a liar, but it's that every time you tell a story, someone discredits you. Okay. To the point where maybe you would say, the reason is because that door jamb moved, or who knows, whatever. Right. And so it's hard to, oh my gosh, it's so terribly hard to explain. But when I was complaining in therapy, my therapist, it was our marriage counselor, she told me that he was very handsome, and what did I have to complain about? So now I'm
Your therapist? Oh, that's a whole nother topic.
Yes, it is.
Go ahead.
Yes, my therapist. Our marriage counselor. Yes, I wanted to murder her. Okay, so imagine you come in, so you're trying to tell a story and say, I'm having these issues. And she said, I don't know what issues you're even talking about. So it's a complete, it's that kind of a thing. Gaslighting is just very incremental. It's very incremental. It does not happen all at once. You're not going to just have it all at one time. It's so funny. I watch TV shows now and I'm like, they're gaslighting that person, and it's so hard. So it's just making that other person question themselves. Yeah. And sadly, there's also secondary gaslighting, which is when people were not believing me after, when you tell your story, even after, and they still look at the other person. See, if the other person is like, they look like the superhero and they look great and, oh, they got remarried and everything's great, Laura must be lying. So we don't really believe her. So it's another form of gaslighting.
Wow, I hadn't really heard of that, but that makes a ton of sense. So, yeah, my friend, what was explained to her in therapy was gaslighting. And this finally, because I never understood what it meant either,
Yeah.
made sense to me. So it actually started, back when you could not get divorced legally unless you had a good reason. And so men, like an extremely good reason. And so it was when they had the gas lights in the home, right? And so men would turn the lights up and down, and their wife would be like, oh my gosh, something's wrong with the lights. And he'd be like, what do you mean? I didn't see anything. It looked fine. And so they literally were like trying to convince them that they were seeing things that didn't exist.
And they were going crazy. Yes. And that's how it makes you feel, because every single thing, it's sort of the, say if I saw an example on a reel and the guy says, you're being so sensitive. And he's like, why are you calling me sensitive? He's like, I didn't call you sensitive. It's that fast. What are you talking about? I didn't call you sensitive. And then you start thinking to yourself, well, maybe I am overreacting. Maybe he didn't call me sensitive, because it's constant, it's incremental. And it does come from that gaslighting. They would turn it down in increments. And then the wife would go over and turn it up, and they would turn it down again and be like, is there something wrong? No, what are you talking about? And it's just all part of the manipulation. So imagine these tiny little lies all the time, and then you just start to believe it. It's sad. You just start to believe. That's why you got to work on yourself. Because when I started working on myself, I was like, oh no, I started to see it. I'm like, oh, he's gaslighting me. And then I started to realize my worth. And that's when you go, no, that's not okay. I said this and you're not believing me. That's not my problem. This is what I said. Yeah.
Well, and knowing your worth and understanding that we're all the same light. Our light just gets dimmed over life, and it's our job to turn it back on, right? But why would one human be inferior to another? Like when you have a clear head, it makes zero sense. Like we are all the same. We all come from the same place. And guess what? We're all going to the same place. And so,
and we all have it. There's enough for all of us to win, right?
Yes, 100%. And, that's why I love so you not only share kind of the telltale signs and the dark stories, but also the light stories of when women like yourself find their self-love again, find their self-worth again. And, what a beautiful transformation. And, this is a very high level, but if you can then actually become grateful for what you went through because it's taking you to this new place, I think that's when you really win in the situation, right?
Yeah.
But
I heard somebody talking about this. I was listening to a podcast before. I always need input. Anyway, but they were talking about, I'm not thankful for the abuse, but I am thankful for what I've gone through. And I thought that was a great way to say it. That's like, I'm not thankful that I went through the abuse, but I'm thankful that where it got me to. And I would not be doing this. I'm not going to dedicate a book to him or anything. I'm not going to do that. I'm not going to say thanks for, abusing me. No, I'm not going to do that, but But what we have to become, we're going to become something from our experiences in life. So what are you going to do with your experience? And you don't have to do a podcast like we're doing. You don't have to write a book. But what are you going to do? And how can you touch lives even by giving a compliment and just loving people around you so that they don't feel alone or sad, like maybe you have felt?
Yeah, no, I love that. And I always like, my dad always told me, everyone has a button that says, make me feel good. And it's your job to go around pushing it. Right.
That's funny.
Yeah. Oh, no, I love that. But what you said is so true, because if we even think back to your story, it was your friends and people at church saying, God, you're so great. I love you. Like, and that's probably what kept you afloat a lot. Like, and these people don't really understand the impact they had on your life just by being good people and being honest and telling you the beauty they saw in you. And that's why I always say the world needs more love. If we all just showed up and love every day, like we overcome so much of this.
It's really hard when you see people, in the world around you being cranky, and I totally get it. But if you realize that those cranky people need something, and And our job is not to say something to somebody and then wait for the appropriate reaction. That's not your job. Your job is just to do the thing. Like find that button, to make somebody feel good. Give somebody a compliment, smile at them. Even if they scowl back or they don't take the compliment, that's not your part to worry about, because it might take a few times for somebody giving them a compliment or something. We just have to think about that. We're going to heal a lot of things. There's people walking around who've never had anybody in their life. They don't have a group. I am thankful I have friends who actually say nice things to me, but not everyone has that. And not everyone knows how to do that. It takes a lot of vulnerability to do that.
Yeah, I agree. And just to see them, like really see, and if you just really listen to and see a person and treat them as a fellow human being, even if it's someone on the street asking you for money, if I don't have money, I still look them in the eye and I say, no, I'm sorry, I don't have anything right now, because I feel the most impactful thing I can do, and, I was taught this in my spiritual practice, is to see them as a human being and hopefully help them connect to that feeling. And so, like you said, there are people silently suffering all around us every day. And just by being kind and being loving or seeing people, we show up, which also comes back to, self-love and self-care, because if you don't love yourself and you're not taking care of yourself, you don't really have anything to give anyone. No. And so we want to talk about that. So Laura, when you got out, or if you had something else to share, please go for it.
No, I was just going to say you can't pour from an empty cup. So
I agree. So when you got out and you started, you shared you started unraveling once you learned about the other woman and just kind of, it was like, the looking glass was shattered or whatever.
Yes,
you saw like your life for what it really had been. Which again, I just got chills as I said that, because, not that it makes the terror you went through good, but what a blessing to be able to see it that way and see that you can go forward. Right. Which I'm sure took you time. So what did you do, or what helped you, or what tips could you give anyone listening, maybe going through that? I know neither of us are experts, so I think the best way is to share our journey, and it might inspire you. You may think of something totally different than what we did, and it actually helps you, right? But so what did you do to help yourself and to rebuild and find self-love again?
Well, I did a lot of crying, and I want to honor that part, because I think people think that they have to only be on a journey towards happiness and finding yourself and what am I going to look like after all this is over? But we have to go through the process. And so I spent a lot of time honoring my body and saying, like, I'm really sad and I'm going to lay in bed and cry with my cat. And that was really helpful because that just gets all those emotions out. And then in my book that you mentioned earlier, I put 52 tips, because they're not, it's not an exhaustive list, but it's things like therapy, which was very important, but find a good therapist, that will listen to you. A lot of times this is considered complex PTSD when you leave an abusive marriage. And so if you can find someone that's trauma informed or will give you information about your trauma, that's helpful. I listen to a lot of podcasts and YouTube and things like that were regarding narcissism and healing from narcissism. I didn't just say, like, let me learn all about narcissists. I wanted to learn about how the heck am I going to heal from this? Yep. And then I was always reminded, do exercise, because your brain does want those dopamine hits, and they, you want to go towards talking to your ex, texting, checking social media, all those things. You might have to take a break from all that. And if you can go no contact, I have grown children. I never have to speak to them ever again if I don't want to. People try and remind me, even at a wedding or whatever. It's like, you know what? I have choices and I do not have to speak to them because I feel like that would be toxic to me. And I don't want to do that. And so I just did a lot of exercising. It can be anything. Just move your body, whatever your body feels like it needs. And we're basically houseplants. Get outside, get some water, get some sunshine. We need it. I mean, we need it. And find that good group of friends. This is not an exhaustive list, but my therapist told me start saying yes to the good things.
I like that.
So, because she wanted to caution me to not say yes to just, nights of binge drinking and stuff like that, which are not going to help you if you are looking for, to move forward, nights of whatever other, insert something else that's not, helpful here. And so she said, just try and say yes to the new things, to the good things. And because the first time someone asked me if I wanted to go hiking, I had a little mini meltdown because that was my ex's thing, was hiking. And you're going to find when you leave, look, I was in it 33 years. When someone asks you, do you like this thing? I didn't know if I did because I had spent so many years with someone who told me what I liked and didn't like that I didn't know if I liked something. And it actually came out the other day, and it's been 16, 17 months. We were making enchiladas and my son goes, red or green? And I was like, I don't know. I don't know which one I want. It's so interesting. So just listening to your body and doing the good things, you're not going to be perfect. Look, no, that's not the goal. The goal is not to be perfect. The goal is to keep moving forward. And if you feel like you're slipping backwards, that doesn't matter. As long as you're not getting into an unsafe place where you're thinking about harming yourself, because then you need to speak to your professional therapist or whatever. I still have my therapist, even though sometimes when we're talking, I'm like, is this even necessary anymore? I think it is, because she gives me things to think about to keep moving forward. Because it was a trauma, that's the thing we have to remember. So that's just some of the things. And I have 52 in my book to give you ideas for a year's worth of healing.
So if you're listening and you'd like to get your hands on Laura's book, which I highly recommend if you're trying to heal from divorce, here's an easy way to do it. Go give us a review, take a screenshot, send it to my team at team@vixengathering.com, and we will buy the book from Laura, have her sign it, and send it to you.
Oh my gosh, that's
we'd
great.
love. Yes, absolutely. So if you want to get her book, that's a great way to do it. And again, all of her information will be in the show notes, including links to grab her book. She has an awesome free downloadable journal on her website, the link to her podcast. If this is ringing true to you or touching you today, there's so many more stories on her podcast, right? Yes. And stories of light as well, of people healing and how you can heal. So, reach out. Please don't be alone. If you're suffering and in pain, reach out. Surround yourself with anyone. Be there with people who uplift and support you. Know that you are not alone, that you are worthy, and that we are all your brothers and sisters here on earth. So, Laura, I loved having you on today. Thank you so much. I'm going to wrap up with a question I like to ask all my guests, and I'm super excited to hear yours because you're very colorful every time I see you. So I always like to talk about our feminine energy and staying true to that. And so I like to ask, what color is your feminine energy?
My feminine energy is hot pink.
Mine is magenta that I have on.
I love it. Especially glittery hot pink, but yes, that's what I love. Love hot pink. That's my color. So
cool. I love it. And when do you feel most in your feminine energy?
When do I? I don't know. When I feel like when I put on something pretty like this and I'm putting on my jewelry and stuff, it's very feminine to me. And I just feel really good. I don't know. I just feel like I'm walking taller. And I don't know, when you feel really good, because, I spend most of my days in sweatpants, but I don't know. That's how I feel. Like I put on my earrings and even though I'm around my house, I'm like, I feel so good. Oh my gosh.
That's so funny you mentioned that because we also did a podcast on dating. Where you're a guest, and because you did a funny post on Instagram, and you actually spurred me. I was like, because we did something about having children in your 40s and 50s, the decision to or not to, and so I was like, let's talk about dating in our 40s and 50s. So Laura's there, and I love that. But it reminds me of that because I always love dating. I can't can't understand when people say I hate dating. I mean, I get it. We're all different, but
Yeah.
I just look at it like, okay, I'm going to go to dinner, maybe have a drink, laugh, have fun, hopefully. But what I do before the date is I take a bath, I light a candle. Like you said, I get pretty, but it's almost like I treat it like my self-care time.
Yeah.
I really make sure I have time for that so that I go relaxed and in my feminine energy. So I think that's why I have such a positive attitude about dating, because I'm like, oh, it's that time I can pour into me and look pretty. But I don't want to give away what we talk about on the episode, so we'll save that. But anyway, if that's you, we'd love to have you go listen, check out that episode. And Laura, thank you so much. You know, you're so graceful in the way you tell your story, and it's so important to share. And like you said, in a safe container where other people feel safe to share their stories as well. So I'm really honored to have you on today. I hope that you have a wonderful day. And for
thank you so much. Oh, sorry. I didn't want to interrupt you, but I wanted to thank you for having me. I mean, I just really appreciate it. And thank you for allowing me to share with your audience, because it just helps get the word out that they're not alone.
Absolutely. No, I actually think you were sent to us, because I was like, okay, I always say maybe you're dealing with a narcissist, and then people would be like, well, how do I know? And I'd be like, I'm not an expert. So, you know, by sharing our experiences, and this is what you talk about all the time, I really appreciate it, because you know, it is an important message. So thank you so much. And for everyone listening, as I always say, the world needs more love. How can you show up in love today? How can you go around touching the other human beings around you, our brothers and sisters? Just think about that and go forward. And I can't wait to talk to you next time. Have a great day.